Rock and rolla. 256.
Pay no attention to the 256 though, because I'm going to be just like the regular media, Pete. Are you going to listen to me? It's episode 257. Or are you going to trust your lying eyes?
What the hell?
Well, because half the time, Pete, they'll tell you, oh, no, the border isn't wide open. Are you, really? My lying eyes. Don't believe your lying eyes. Don't believe your lying eyes that it's that gasoline is $6 a gallon in LA. Don't believe your lying eyes, Pete. Listen to us.
Yeah. Holy smokes. Yeah. Well, we've gone off on a tangent already. I like it.
Bang. It's Fed Day.
Fed Day.
So that's going to be our macro minute, Pete.
Mm-hmm.
My brother Pete Najarian and I give you macro minute, fantastic futures, a bunch of stocks, and then some sports every day, 4 days a week. We take Friday off for travel. All right. Fed Day, Pete. Yep. Is he going to move on rates? No. Is he going to say, we're probably going to give you another one, maybe two more in the next couple meetings? Yes.
I think you're probably pretty accurate with that, John. I mean, I was looking at it again today because we know the CME, who's going to someday be a proud sponsor. But anyway, they've got that Fed Watch tool, right? 99% chance that they just pause and stay right here. And if you just go back a month ago, John, it was in the upper 80%. Then a week ago it was 96%. Now we're sitting at 99%. I think they do that because they'd like to be 100%, but they just don't want to do it. They just can't make themselves do it. But we still, as you were just indicating, though, or talking about is November. How about November 1st? What do we think happens there? Given all the data, I think that is going to be a game changer, and that could be something that might shift that around a little bit back to more of what we've been seeing as opposed to what we're seeing going into today.
I think that's correct, and I think the markets are literally just treading water, Pete, because not even the interest rate complex is moving. The 10-year. So for fantastic futures.
Fantastic futures.
The 10-year sitting there at 4.32, which isn't the high, but it's that far from a multi-year high. We've got crude oil basically holding 91 pretty strong. It's not up big today, but it was briefly right below 91, and now it's 91.43. So those are my fantastic futures, Pete.
And I like those, John, and I think you're exactly right, accurate. They're literally just pausing, just like the Fed, and waiting for the Fed, and obviously the conversation that follows from the Fed. Obviously, Jay Powell oftentimes can say things that all of a sudden get twisted around by the likes of Leisman and some of the others, and you never know what, to think of it after that. And then we see some big moves. I will tell you this, speaking of big moves, what's moved recently a lot has been the price of gold. And just keep an eye on that. And the only reason I say that, John, is it's up $30 in the last week or so. Up $12 today alone. It's trading around 1965. It's very near where some of that resistance has been. If you pull up a chart and you look over the last couple of months, you'll see pops up, falls right back down again. Pops up, falls back down again. So 1970, 75, somewhere in there is a level where it just hasn't been able to get through unless you go all the way back, not too terribly long ago, but all the way back to May when it was 2000. So we'll see if it can actually break out again. But that has been one area that we've seen, and we've seen a lot of option paper flowing into GLD on a positive side of it as well. So maybe we will see 2000 again.
Could. Sure could. There was a big bet the other day, Pete, that we would see that at the GLD, a lot of speculative paper with the GLD at about 139. And they were betting on the 141 calls, I think. So, yeah, we could see another pop through 2000. All right, let's talk about Pinterest, because PINS is up because the company projected year-over-year revenue growth at their first ever investor day, Pete. And because of that, and maybe a buyback that you'll talk about, we got JP Morgan and DA Davidson and Citi all giving them a big thumbs up, and it's already trading 25 million shares versus a normal 10 million share turnover.
Yeah, this is big for Pinterest. This is a name, John, that when we have had unusual option activity, it's usually been fairly accurate, quite honestly. A lot of call buying, and we've seen it go to the upside. We've also seen some of the put buying, and they've been right on that side of it frequently as well. Or are they actually buying? Sometimes you can interpret some of the put buying as sort of a protective sort of a position that people are putting on. All that being said, free cash flow, phenomenal, John. We're talking about some big numbers there, 400 plus million bucks. You also got $1 billion buyback that you were just referencing as well. So that's something. But it really is about the guidance and what the interpretation is from Citi and some of the others. Citi, I think, moved to a $36 price target from 31. Today, the stock got up and above that $28 level. So it's got a little ways to travel. It's got time. When these oftentimes people think, well, they said it's a 36 price target. Yeah, they did, but they didn't say it's happening next week. They're just giving you basically oftentimes over the next 9 months or years what they're looking at. But in either case, when you look at what's going on with Pinterest, they are gathering folks. They are starting to get a lot more stickiness, and that's been great for the franchise so far.
You bet. And Pinterest is an interesting social media play too, Pete.
Yep.
And there's an awful lot of memes on Pinterest. People grab those and post them up there and elsewhere. So worth looking at. All right. Coty, C-O-T-Y. They could call this the Kardashian Foundation or something, Pete, because they bought a 20% stake in Kim's company back in 2020. And for 200 mil, valued hers obviously at $1 billion at that point. And then they'd also bought one of her sister's many companies and bought 50%, maybe it was even 51% of that company. So they are hitting it hard. They are up 6% today. Basically, they said that Burberry Goddess, a fragrance I've never heard of, is breaking out to the upside. And that, this is proof that their go-to destination for winning fragrances is continuing to draw in both investors as well as fans of the fragrances.
Yeah, well, and the sales growth, they got a better number than they had, John. They were looking for about 6 to 8% growth there. On the other hand, they said, well, we're now going to go to 8 to 10% growth there. And you talk about the strength in some of the fragrances like you were just referencing. That's something they talked about as well. They talked about an increased demand, which is probably a little bit surprising for a lot of us because we know that people are having to, check out their pocketbooks a little bit. We know how much debt folks have. And you'd also wonder, are they going to cut back on some of this stuff? Well, apparently not. And it looks like Coty's in a great position right now, John. Fundamentally, this company looks fantastic in just about every way. By the way, year to date, this is a stock that's up 40%. So this has had a nice run to the upside. And if these projections are right, it isn't over, John. I think there's plenty of room still to the upside. It's pushing near the 52-week highs. It's not at the 52-week highs. But I don't think that's that far away from establishing higher 52-week highs.
Yeah, I would say that this is one of those, it might not seem like it, Pete, but I'm going to call it an affordable luxury.
Yeah.
Because it's not like an Hermes bag or some of these really expensive things that run in the tens of thousands, $20,000, $30,000, $40,000. This is something that even if you're paying up big for a fragrance, what are you paying? 180, 200 bucks? That's in the sweet spot for the consumer, in my opinion, versus something that's a $10,000 or $20,000. Those are the things that they buy the knockoffs of. Mm-hmm. They're not buying as much in the knockoff fragrance space, but I realize there are knockoff fragrances out there. Mm-hmm. All right. How about Steelcase, Pete?
Yeah.
These are desks, of course, probably not the desk that you have at home, but it could be. But an awful lot of businesses have Steelcase in there. They're made right over in Michigan, across the lake from Chicago. And they reported Q2 earnings of 31 cents versus 21. Year over year, they had revenue that was still very strong, guidance that was strong. Stocks up 27%, Pete. So this is a big mover today.
It's a monstrous mover. And for all the right reasons, John, when you look at what they did with the performance they had, crushing the earnings. And when I say crushing them, 31 cents versus 21 cents. That's crushing them. By the way, really crushing them was last quarter. It was up 400%. So when you look at these numbers and you look at last quarter, you just go, well, how did they do that? Well, they did it again, and they've been doing it time and time again. So they are in the sweet spot right now. They've got all the right fundamentals. They continue to raise on different fronts for what they've got right now. John, it hit 52-week highs today. This is another one where I'd say, you know what? Based upon what they've been able to do, and they've been doing it quarter after quarter, I got to trust what their guidance is. I think this stock is going a heck of a lot higher than it is right now. And I think the 52-week highs, it's going to shatter through today's, and it'll be a lot higher in the not too distant future. Maybe it'll take another 3 months. Maybe if they crush their earnings again, they'll see those numbers. But this is a stock that I think, at 11 and a half bucks or thereabouts, could it get to 13? Absolutely it could.
Yep. And they're calling that modest organic revenue growth, Pete. And you and I will say that for a brand like this one, again, it's a business brand. It's not a consumer brand nearly as much, but this is pretty strong. And that's why you're getting a lot of folks squeezed on the short side.
Yep.
Let's talk now about one of those many IPOs that were successful on the IPO, but boy, you better be quick to take some profits, Pete. Instacart, again, when people are paying somebody else to do their shopping for them, we understand that old people, infirmed people, or just out of sheer convenience, people might use something like this. But that latter group, the sheer convenience part, I got to believe is cutting way back on that, Pete. Because again, if you want to buy the Kim Kardashian West fragrance for $200 or whatever it might be, that's that affordable luxury. You're probably not going to want to pay 15% on top of your grocery bill, but that's what you do when you use Instacart. It was going to come out at 30, Pete, which it did. They raised, I think they put out 22 million shares, but then the first trade was 42. Take a look at where it is now and see if you wish that you would have taken that profit like that, because it's below 32.
Yeah, this is one of those, John, that, I don't think it should be surprising to us. I think a lot of people got a little bit overhyped on this whole thing, and suddenly IPOs are what everybody's looking at. Take a look at ARM Holding just from the other day, right? I mean, that's another one where it was a $69 stock that's now getting hammered down each and every day since it came out public. I'm looking at Instacart. There's competition out there. And one of them, believe it or not, is coming from Shipt and others, obviously. But that's a company that was bought by Target years ago. So they aren't the only one out there. And because of that, they're not necessarily unique in any way. There's a lot of folks out there that'll deliver for you. So I just look at it, John, as, you know what, this is one of those that I never had interest on the IPO. You and I both oftentimes want to be in on those IPOs because you can get that pop. They did get the pop, but for those that actually had to hold on or chose to hold on even for a day, now they're regretting that because this stock is right back down there. And I wouldn't be surprised if it goes into negative territory, except for the fact that maybe one of these houses will come out that are going to start buying the stock just to hold it up above that IPO price. But this is one of those that I wasn't interested in, and it looks like I made the right decision.
Yeah, that green shoe, folks, is the additional shares that are issued to that syndicate of basically banks, brokerage firms that basically do exactly what Pete said. They're supposed to try to hold it at that level. And how do they do that? Well, they probably sold it a little higher, and then they exercise and they can step in and, buy more and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, that green shoe, look it up, folks. It's very interesting on any IPO. All right, Pete, let's talk sports. Let's talk NFL. What do you got?
I got this one, John, and it's just focused on one game this week that I think is almost, not to be too much of an alarmist, but is there a little bit of panic out there? And I think there probably should be. In the NFL, we all know you play 17 games. Well, we've played through 2 games, and 2 teams that have played close to their competition, but they can't seem to be able to win, are the Minnesota Vikings and the LA Chargers. And I'll tell you what, John, Chargers look great in just about every way, except on defense. They can't stop people. They're putting up points. They've done a great job offensively, but they lost to the Dolphins in an absolute shootout. As a matter of fact, the opposing quarterback, Tua, threw for 500 or 460 yards on them. They put up 536 yards on that defense. And by the way, Tannehill is not known for being a great passer. He was okay in the game. He was actually very accurate. He was 20 of 24. So whenever you see a quarterback who can do that, he's doing something very efficiently, right? And then all of a sudden you give the ball to Derrick Henry and you run all over the San Diego Chargers. They win that game. So the Chargers lose 27-24. Now they got to come to the Minnesota Vikings and play here. Vikings lost to Tampa. They had 4 turnovers. The Vikings also lost again to Philadelphia Eagles. They had 3 more turnovers. The Vikings cannot hold on to the ball. And because of that, even though Kirk Cousins is having an amazing start to the year, they can't put up enough points because their defense, by the way, I've been critical of the defensive coordinator and the defense since they hired him because, John, they got linebackers on the field that you and I would dwarf right now. The two of us standing next to those Viking linebackers, you'd look at them and go, what are you, a safety, maybe a corner, something like that? You weigh about 210, maybe 215 or something like that. I mean, it's amazing. So these teams are having, how about the Philadelphia Eagles? When they played against them the other day, they just ran up and down the field on the Vikings, John. They put up 260 yards on the ground. And that's when they had that receiver, Brown, all mad because he didn't get any catches. Because why would they throw him the ball, John, if they can run for 6 or 7 yards a carry? And they stuck to their guns. They did the right thing. They kept pounding the ball, the Vikings. They said, look, if you ever can show us that you could stop us, maybe we'd throw the ball, but you've not shown it all week, all game. So my question is this. They're both 0-2. What do you think if the Vikings lose this game at home? Are they in trouble for playoffs and everything else? It doesn't look that good right now, right?
No, in fact, they should basically tank the season, Pete, since every other league lets you do that. You might as well tank the season and go for Caleb out of USC, who, by the way, looks a hell of a lot better than Bryce Young. Yeah. I mean, Bryce Young, are you kidding me? You traded your future for this guy, and he looks like a skinny little nothing out there for the Carolina Panthers. I am not impressed. Arizona Cardinals, we knew they'd stink, Pete. They had the lowest over-under 4.5 games of any team in the NFL. And yes, they played the Giants tough, but let's keep in mind the Giants lost 40-0 in that first game. Yeah, they made a big comeback against a just terrible NFL team, but the Giants ain't out of the woodshed yet, Pete. And if they played anybody other than the Cardinals, they might be 0-2 also. So you got the Cardinals, the Panthers, Chicago Bears. I'm just going to gloss over because we suck. Cincinnati Bengals also 0-2. And Burrow, Pete, is he going to come back healthy? He's a great quarterback. He just got the biggest contract in NFL history, and now he's down. Mm-hmm. So the Bengals, they've looked terrible. Broncos, well, I think Pete and I both thought they put a lot of pressure on themselves by having Sean Payton flap his lips about, one of the Jets coaches. And, some bad luck, but they don't look good. And they've got all that Walmart money. Houston Texans, terrible. CJ Stroud, a little better, I guess. But the Rams, the Chargers, Pete, like you say, the Vikings, the Patriots, they're all looking pretty damn bad.
Yeah, there's a lot of teams that just have not looked good early. And maybe because there are so many that look terrible, maybe there will be some cream rising to the top from the terrible. Maybe the best of the worst, so to speak, might be showing up. But by the way, I don't know if you saw it, but Pat Mahomes just re-upped his contract yesterday as well. So now he's back in charge of being the highest paid guy in football. But Burrow,
that was amazing. You're right.
Amazing. And John, Burrow, last year they were 0-2 and they had some issues going on and they still made it into the playoffs. They got pretty far, actually. I think they lost to Kansas City, if I'm not mistaken. But in any case, they're kind of looking back at that themselves saying, well, maybe we're in the same spot. Because I don't know that they're playing terribly, but they do need Burrow. And Burrow's been beat up. We know that even before the season started. that's when he first got hurt. And now he's trying to play on what seems to be a little bit of a damaged leg. So we'll see how that whole thing plays out. But there's an awful lot of bad teams right now. I'd actually say of the bad teams, the Chargers and Vikings are the least bad, probably. So we'll see how it all plays out this weekend. It should be a lot of fun, actually. And it's right over here, just a few minutes from me. I might be able to catch that game, actually, when I come back from Vegas. All right, John. Sleeper for college football. When I say sleeper, I'm not saying somebody who's completely outrageously out of the prospects of ever being into the playoff, but I like what I see out of the Washington Huskies. And here's why. First of all, the Pac-12 has come out blazing this year. They look outstanding. Secondly, they got a quarterback who's in his, sixth year, because you can do that now. But Michael Penix is absolutely unbelievable, and nobody knows his name because they've got Caleb and they've got all these other players at different schools all around the country. Now Shedeur Sanders obviously is in that conversation of great quarterbacks. Well, let me tell you about Michael Penix, John. Last year they went 10-2. They had their 2 losses in the pack. They were at UCLA, lost. They lost Arizona State. They just, they had too many turnovers. They beat Texas, the same Texas everybody loves right now because that quarterback was there last year. 27-20 in the Alamo Bowl. They beat them. So Washington was not a bad team. He threw 31 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. He only got sacked 5 times, which says a lot about how his release is and how fast they run their offense. He threw for 4,600 yards last year. This year, in 3 games, he's thrown for 1,300 yards, 12 touchdowns, and an interception. So this guy is one of those guys that's not getting talked about. Nobody knows who he is because he's stuck way up there in Washington. Nobody wants to talk about these guys anymore. So I'm kind of defending the Pac-12, which is part of the Big Ten now, some of them. It's going to be kind of interesting, John, because I think this kid and that team who's riding on him, they could be one of those teams that actually gets a lot further than people think. And that quarterback, I'll tell you what, I think he's a sleeper. I don't think anybody understands how good of a team this Washington team is right now.
Let me tell you, I watched some of the highlights, Pete, of them just decimating Michigan State. And you and I were talking about Michigan State because they fired the head coach and so forth. But again, I don't know if I've ever seen a guy. Well, I never have, of course. Nobody has. I've never seen a coach get a 10-year, $90 million contract, lose like whatever it was, 40 something to, maybe they scored. I can't even remember. But Washington put up 40 on them, Pete.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure if they crossed the 50 more than once or twice against a very stout Washington defense. So, and that's Michigan State. Like I said, I've never seen a team that thought that their coach was so great that they give him a 10-year contract at 90 mil and they just get blown out of the stadium. But there are some, let me throw this out there. I know you have watched Notre Dame, Pete. They look great. The Ducks, they look great, but they played Hawaii. So give me a break. The Rainbow Warriors are great, but not a great football team. Utah, I don't think anybody wants to play Utah, Pete. Nope. Nobody wants to play Utah. And I think there's a whole bunch of teams on that list. It is Georgia, Michigan, Texas. Pick your, top 1, 2, or 3 out of those, and they deserve to be there. But Southern Cal deserves to be in that conversation. Oregon and Notre Dame deserve to be in that conversation as well. But, until they play a few more games, they're not going to be in there. But I agree with you. That kid from Washington, at least if he stays healthy, he will be in the top 2 rounds, Pete, for sure.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and they're fun to watch anyway. And, with the dismantling of the Pac-12, as we've documented many times, it's interesting to see that this might be the best Pac-12 season ever. Everywhere you look, you've got teams that are really good, great quarterback play, good defenses finally. And they're, you look at the top 20 and all of a sudden you go, well, geez, the whole conference is in the top 20 practically from the Pac-12 right now. It's amazing between Utah and Washington, Washington State, Oregon State, SC, UCLA, all of them. It's amazing. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, and
you want to crown them, then crown their ass.
You do get to crown. I'll tell you what, let's see how they do when they actually have to play some real competition in the Pac-12, because they are real this year.
Yeah. And by the way, Pete, just, because we both love giving Coach Prime his props and, occasionally offering some criticism and so forth. But I thought it was very classy what he and Travis Hunter did separately and together by saying, don't blame Blackburn. That's a football play. He didn't go for his head. It was a late hit. I said that at the time, but it was a freak accident as well, because you're coming over there to close that guy out. And yes, the ball hit the ground. I realize that, folks, before you light me up on Twitter for that. But they said the classy thing, Pete, which was football play. He's a good football player. They're talking about Blackburn, the safety for Colorado State. And they said there should not be death threats on this kid. Hunter's going to be coming back. He's going to play great when he comes back. In a way, Pete, I think it also gives Coach Prime, not that he's looking for an excuse, because nobody wants a player hurt to get that excuse. Right. But this is a guy that, as Pete said, played 126 snaps in the first game and played over 100 against Nebraska. So, because he goes both ways, he's a corner and a wide receiver. So getting him fresh and not having him available in this game, I mean, oh my God, Pete, if they were to be able to beat Oregon, that would be unbelievable. And keep in mind, though, that Oregon's coming into the altitude, Pete.
Yeah.
A lot of people, they play at sea level at Oregon, just like USC, like all the the Pac-12 does, except for Utah, which gets a little elevation. But the rest of them are all at sea level. You go up to a mile high, you're going to be breathing heavy. They're a better team than Colorado. They should beat them, especially without Travis Hunter. But that altitude does take a little out of you, Pete. And if they get a couple thumps on them, it could be a ccloser game than people think.
Yeah, it was a classy move. I thought I loved seeing Prime actually step up to the plate and who had done. Raise your hand if you didn't have a flag for a late hit. I played a long time, and let me tell you, I got quite a few flags. And it is about just being a football player. You're running, you've run across the field, you've done all that, and you leave your feet, and all of a sudden, people are, oh, that was dirty. It's like, no, I was in the middle of the play. But, there is a time where it's obviously a late hit. It's clear. And that was one of them. But that it doesn't mean you're not always, it doesn't mean you're a total cheap shot or anything else. And I think that was great that Dion stepped up and at least gave a little bit of comfort for him and his family, because as you said, the guy literally was getting death threats from people. So, it's nice to see that there is a good little bit of that football friendship going across the state there in Colorado.
Yep. Well, folks, Pete and I will be in Vegas tomorrow, but we will be doing the Rebels Edge at the usual time, 1 p.m. Eastern time. Then we'll be out there for a charity function in Vegas. It's called the Market Minds Summit, and it's put on by Velocity Trading and Clearing, and it's going to be a fantastic event. We've got Citron from, the Mr. Left from Citron Research, and a whole bunch of great traders and advisors that are going to be there. And all the money goes to charity. Not a penny goes to Pete and John. And we're not trying to sell you any tickets because I believe it's sold out. Right. But that's where we'll be in Vegas. And yeah, Pete always gets to be Batman when we go to the clubs in Vegas. Did you see that one today, Pete?
I did. I saw that thing. Yeah.
Check out that tweet from this morning, folks. We'll be at Excess watching the Chainsmokers Saturday night. Have a great one. We'll be back tomorrow at 1.